G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome to another video, and welcome to the very first video I am making on Gran Turismo 7. I did a stream the other day, but today is our first video, and I did a little bit of a test for today's video here, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. The biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that was advertised and marketed quite heavily was dynamic weather in Gran Turismo 7, and that's what we're going to be testing out today. So I'm going to set up a custom race, and I'm going to show you all the steps I did to do it. So first of all, I jumped in the car I wanted to do, which is the Supra GT500. I have to go into the tuning shop and buy the tyres. So this is not something Gran Turismo Sport had. You could choose any tyre straight out of the box for any car. But for here, I have to make sure I have my racing tyres purchased, and I'm sort of going through the other tuning parts as well. I've found the fully customizable racing transmission, so I've bought that in case I ever need to do some transmission tuning. But for the most part in this car, which is registered in the Group 3 category, so that's carried over, a lot of the parts I actually can't install. It's not applicable, NA. Which I think is perhaps their way of keeping the Group 3 cars relatively balanced among one another, as you can't actually change too much to do with the car. I found the ballast, so I've purchased that, but essentially I'm just future-proofing. I'm pretty much buying everything that I can that I foresee myself needing. There's the nitrous there. I found the nitrous, 100,000 credits to add nitro to the car. I don't think I can use it today in my race that I'm about to do, but it's purchased there, ready to go anyway. I went to leave, but realised I forgot to actually buy the wet tyres, because yes, you have to buy those too. So it's under the extreme category in the tuning shop, the heavy wets and the intermediates. So about $20,000-$30,000 for the set of tyres. The same goes for the racing slicks. They're quite expensive, so definitely a bit of money. Really easy to spend a lot of your money here. But then we go into the World Circuit section, and we're going to do the race at High Speed Ring today. One of the very first. One of the first original circuits we're going to see in Gran Turismo. So I'm going to set up a quick race here. 25 laps around High Speed Ring with a rolling start. This is going to be against AI. We're going to set the difficulty to maximum, put a bit of fuel use and tyre use on there. And then this is the important part, time and weather settings. So there's preset weather and custom weather. I'm obviously going to choose custom. You choose your overall time of day. So this is kind of similar to what we saw in GT Sport there. I think I'm going to go with evening. You've got the time-speed ratio, so I think it's the rate at which the time of day changes. That's my understanding of it so far. And now the way they've done this is separate the race out in 5 segments, so 20% chunks of the race, and you can choose the different times of day, and it's going to do a dynamic change among all the available, or all your set times, or all your set weather conditions. So we're going to start off random. You can choose random, and then you can choose specific. So we're going to go sort of further down. You can see it gets cloudier. There's all sorts of different ones, and they've got a letter code as well. We'll memorize those, I'm sure, as we get deeper into the game. I'm going to set torrential rain to happen in the middle of the race. So that's R08 there in the middle. You can see it's raining. I think I'm now going to have it so that the rain dissipates as the race goes on. So we're going to have the rain lightening up in the last in the second last 20% of the race, and then right towards the end I'm going to set it to go sunny again. So this is going to be a really good test to see exactly how the dynamic time of day changes in the race and what it looks like. So now I'm just going to fast forward this bit again. Professional difficulty, Group 3, which is the car that this Supra GT500 is. We're going to have penalties on, so it'll be interesting to see how they're implemented there. But that is about it for all the setup of the race. Pretty quick fire run through all the tuning bits. You can also mess with the tuning settings on the car. We're going to make sure we start on the softs too. You can also, so you can mess with the setup on the car as well as the parts. So there's a lot to do, but I'm just running the stock standard setup with those couple of upgrades I added on. But this is the race. I've messed up the standing start already. Let's get underway. 25 laps at a brand new circuit here, and there's going to be a lot to run through today because there are a lot of new features to do with this wet weather. The biggest, one of the main features, weather radar. So you can see there's not really much to show at that particular moment. We'll get deeper into the weather radar later, but that's going to tell me the strength of the rain and how far away the rain is, and we can expect that to happen in this race. But here we go, up against the AI. If we remember in GT Sport, the AI was pretty crap, even on the professional difficulty. So, first early doors, because I messed up my start, I was a couple of seconds away, and after about 2 corners, I'm already caught back up with the pack. However, it's not looking as bad as it did in GT Sport, because I'm trying to go around the outside of this Ford GT, which translates to a double overtake at the following left-hander at turn 4 here. Massive snap of oversteer. We're going to have to watch about that, or watch for that rather, and the AMG just takes advantage of my mistake there and drives past. We're down into 18th again. We've pretty much given everything. We've handicapped ourselves as much as possible, started on the back of the grid. We've not given ourselves too tremendous of an upgrade. The nitrous isn't available, even though we added it onto the car. I guess I didn't allow it in the regulations, but it's all good. So that's our first lap done of high-speed ring. It's actually a fairly simple circuit on paper, but it's definitely going to be harder as you try and wring out the maximum speed from each of the corners. Obviously, turn 1 here in Group 3 is going to be flat out. And you can see we've got nowhere to go here, but the gap opens up on the outside of the Peugeot, and we're half off the track as we get that overtake done around the outside of, I think it was the Mercedes there as well. We're going to try and get the switch back on this Mustang, but it was sort of right where I was going to put the car, and I wasn't able to commit to the throttle on that particular occasion, and we're not able to get that move done on the Mustang. He sends it down slightly defensive to turn 3 here, going to look around the outside, which is going to be the inside for the next turn, so not a bad overtaking spot on the track here. Up behind another AMG. Make sure we keep this this oversteer under control, and that is us up into 15th. No sign of the weather on the way yet, but we are just going to focus on getting this last turn right. Obviously, I didn't know the track, but I take this corner a lot better than I did on the first lap. Actually, I actually braked a little bit on the first lap there. I'm just really not familiar with this circuit whatsoever, but I thought if I'm going to showcase the wet weather, I may as well do it on a track that is fairly simple to learn on the fly. So I think by the end of it, I found myself some braking points, which was pretty good. It also happened to be the only track I had unlocked at this particular time with wet weather. A nice little switchback manoeuvre on these 2 blue cars here, a Mustang and a Mercedes. I went up high to come back down and slingshot down the inside at turn 2, and that's us up into 12th. We catch up to this Corvette. It takes us a little while. We're still just doing that little comfort lift at the last turn. I think we'll get more comfortable with that as time goes on. A little bit of contact between the Corvette there, and you might have seen the puff of smoke between the 2 cars. We made that slight bit of contact here, and this is interesting. It looks like I am a little bit better under slipstream conditions, because I would have been hardly getting an edge of the slipstream off the back of the Jaguar. The Corvette would have been much closer, much stronger in that slipstream range than me, and I've managed to just drive past the both of them. Not quite up to the slipstream of Jay Bird up in 9th, the American driver. I'm going to say driver, it's AI, but as you can see, the AI actually aren't half bad, actually, and it's definitely not as easy as it is in GT Sport. We're just going to fast forward through this a little bit as we run slightly wide and clip the barrier. That could have been a lot worse, but what it does is just lose our speed out of the tunnel there, and the group of 3 up ahead just got to drive away a little bit at this stage, which is headed by a Hyundai Genesis, Ford GT in the middle, and the DBR9 at the back. The DBR9 and the Ford in particular get a particularly poor exit out of the final turn, but I think this Ford GT has much better straight line speed. We saw a lot of this in GT Sport, is the Ford GT having a big straight line speed advantage there. It drives past the Hyundai, and I'm in the slipstream of this Ford GT, and I'm struggling to sort of catch up there. I'm also trying my best to keep the car under control, because that very grip limited, or the turn 1 is very difficult to sort of keep the car nice and settled, especially if you're unfamiliar with it. I wouldn't actually say turn 1 is grip limited, because there's plenty of more steering lock I can put on the car if I so wanted to, but it's not necessary for turn 1. But I think by this stage we're seeing the conditions around the track starting to darken. So there was a lot of blue sky and just sort of scattered cloud at the start, but the cloud's starting to gather a little bit more. Currently on that weather radar there, I've got it set to the maximum distance there, so you can see there's like 50, 100, 150 kilometre little concentric circles down on the weather radar there. I think we're going to get this last turn correct this time. We've found the confidence to take it flat out. We get past the Ford GT, or get a slight overlap on the Ford GT, but once again, its superior straight line speed just means we can't actually translate that into an overtake, and it might just about be good enough for that Ford GT to grab some slipstream off the car up ahead of it, driven by S. de Groot. The French driver there, I think they're driving the Aston Martin V12 Vantage. Or dab of brakes from the Ford GT heading through turn 1. That's definitely not what you need to do. And we're able to get up the inside of the Ford GT and the Aston Martin that gets a poor run off turn 1 as well. And that's a double move up into turn 2. Actually, the Aston Martin's hung it around the outside. The Ford GT is stuck behind with nowhere to go. He's going to go to the wrong side. He's going to go to the outside for turn 3. And that's not going to translate into an overtake like we were able to do. So look at that, Smokescreen better than AI confirmed, but still, we're 6 laps in, nearly 7 laps in here, and we're still not into the lead yet. We're still 5 seconds off the lead, but we're just going to grab this slipstream off the Aston Martin. I'm not actually sure what the slipstream range is at this particular stage. I don't know if it's still the 7.5 tenths we saw in GT Sport. I guess only time will tell, but look at that, a much better run off the back of the final turn on that particular time there. We sail past the V12 Vantage, which you think with 12 cylinders it should be pretty good in a straight line, but I guess my Supra GT 500 is better. We're going to get a pretty good run down the straight there, good enough that we're sort of beginning to catch the two up ahead, M. Galloway and M. Blanchard. I wonder if they're both named Matthew or something, or Michael. Let's pretend that that's that. So we caught up to Michael number 1 by the end of lap 9. The conditions are pretty dark there, but down on the weather radar there's still no sign of rain. We'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. But yeah, the conditions are very dark, so still no need to come into the pits yet. But what was sort of on my mind here is I'm looking down at my tyre wear at this particular stage. I started on the Racing Soft, so the least durable tyre compound, and I think I set the tyre wear multiplier to ×4, so I'm looking at that. At this stage thinking, gee, I hope the rain comes soon so I can time this pit stop to go onto the wet tyres, because I don't want to have to pit off this dry set of tyres onto another dry set of tyres. There's the oversteer that my tyre wear's beginning to cause. Another kick of oversteer out of there, and I immediately look behind because contrary to GT Sport, the AI are right there. They're right there to pick up the pieces of a mistake should you make one, and that was a pretty large mistake there, and I was under pressure from AI. So I've come around to the pit entry now, flicked onto the weather radar, so still no sign of the moisture. So we've gone around one more time, and then coming up towards the end of this lap, look at this. Okay, so I've sped this up here. This is on the weather radar. You can see that blue patch from the bottom left of the radar in the third quadrant there, starting to creep towards the centre. It's still about 75 kilometres away from the centre, which is where the track is. So I'm just going to zoom it in to see a 75 kilometre sweep here, and I can zoom it right in. You can see the shape of the track. But look at that, so the weather's creeping in. There's the circles to tell me how far away. It's about to reach the 50 kilometre circle, so it's going to be 50 kilometres away. It's obviously a very fast moving system, this one, and there it's going to be 50 k's away. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, which should tell me a lot more about when this weather is going to actually hit. So the closest we can get is 3 kilometres away from the circuit, and it actually is so close that we can see exactly which parts of the circuit is going to be raining. So that particular zoom level would be pretty useful for something like the Nürburgring, where you might have it raining on one end of the circuit and not the other. You can tell which end of the circuit it's going to be raining on. But I've gone around one more time because the rain is still not here, and there's another little aspect of the wet weather that we haven't even talked about yet as we finally got past Galloway. And here we go. Let's have a look here. We've got a wet surface indicator on the left-hand side of the tyre wear as well, and this is going to tell me how much water is actually on the surface, and it's got 2 little increments halfway through, and that tells me, well, that's a rough estimate of when I may need to change the tyres. So as long as it's in that bottom third, you can kind of get away on the slick tyres. As soon as it gets up into the middle, that's when you start to need your intermediates and start to need your heavy wets. But I know it's going to be really, really detrimental to be caught on a really wet track on the slick tyres. So I'm now looking at this, and that water surface indicator is beginning to creep up towards that first line there, and I'm looking at that at this stage. I'm seeing the spray on the other cars, and I'm making my decision here to actually go into the pits. I've also got pretty worn soft tyres now, so as we go around the outside of this DBR9, as we've just dropped off the pace a little bit, which definitely tells me we need to jump into the pit lane, and we're going to dive it into the pits here at high speed ring. And I had no idea the AI would brake, so I completely run into the back of them. But over to the heavy wet tyres we go. as far as a comparison in the pit sequence between GT7 and GT Sport, it's fairly similar actually. It's pretty much identical, as we just put this little bit of fuel in the car that we actually need to make it to the end. I'm not sure how long this wet period's going to last, so I'm going to put all the fuel in I need to get to the end. That way I definitely don't have to come in for a second stop. But here we go, we're out onto the wet tyre on the wet circuit. If you remember at the start, it was completely sunny, so we've finally got dynamic weather. We've got what we were all longing for in GT Sport. It's just a quick cycle through the views there, and you may have just caught a glimpse of all the raindrops landing on the windscreen. But as we head into turn 2, the braking point's changed. We've used our regular braking point, and it's not early enough. We've slid deep into that particular corner there, so we're going to have to be really careful, make sure to brake earlier, and it's going to be really crucial to actually see how this car handles the high-speed turn. So turn 1, I guess the big question is it going to be flat? As we slide deep into turn 3 again, still trying to suss out exactly where to brake, and I think someone up ahead here is actually, oh, look at this AI car sliding everywhere. That is the danger of staying out one extra lap. So yeah, that Corvette is clearly still on the dry tyre, and that would have been me if I stayed out this extra lap. Lucky I pitted when I did, but look at this weather radar now. Oh dear, there's more shenanigans going on here. A car's completely rotated there, so the AI are struggling. But look at all the colours on the weather radar. They're little patches of heavier rain, so we've got the little colour code up the left-hand side of the weather radar there, which tells me just how heavy the rain's going to be. So obviously the heaviest is the purple at the top, and the lightest is the light blue at the bottom. So, you know, there's... Oh, no, we've spun out! We spun out coming into turn 1. Oh, dear. So there it is. The wet weather has caught me out, and that just goes to show how easy it is. We've got to try and recover this car on the wet track now, and as we look behind... Bang! Oh my goodness, that was a crash and a half. Lucky these are AI cars, hey, and not not other racers. So I've actually been the car there. Turn 1 is not flat in the heavy wet conditions there. You can see the water surface indicator on the bottom left of the screen next to the tyre wear indicators is actually just creeping up into the top third of the meter, and it's actually a slightly darker blue in that top third as well. So I think that tells me that that's waterlogged aquaplaning. That's just an insane amount of water on the surface there, and you have to be really careful and pretty much prepared to lose the car. Another thing we have in this game is actually puddles. So the puddles can form on the circuit, which can actually make you crash. So it's pretty realistic water simulation here, not like GT Sport where it was just a wet circuit and that was it. It's actually a changing circuit, a dynamic circuit. The real things that drivers have to look out for IRL are actually in the game. You have to look for the puddles, you have to memorise where they are, and there's one on the exit of the tunnel here. You saw the water splashing up of the car ahead and me. That Aston Martin DBR9's going really slow actually, and oh, a bit of contact between us. So the final turn's definitely not flat anymore, slight bit of brake. Oh, and a penalty. Got a penalty for that contact, I guess. So there you go, there's the contact penalties. We'll fast forward up the straight here. We've made up a couple of positions there, and that is going to be that's going to be it until lap 15. We catch up to this Ford GT around the outside. And something interesting here, I want you to look down on the radar now, or actually I want you to look at the tyres of this Ford GT here. Bang, water splash. There's water splashing up for me, so we've hit a puddle there. And now I want you to listen to the rain and look at the weather radar. So as those heavier patches of rain sort of went over the top of us, the sound of the rain changed as that really heavy rain went past that yellow patch, which is heading up towards the higher end of the level of rain that we can see in this game. As that went over the top of us, the sound got louder, more rain was falling, and the water surface is almost completely waterlogged now, with puddles forming on the inside, really slippery, shiny curbs here this Mustang is struggling with as it's going really slow on the apex of turn 2. And yeah, so really interesting to see how the sound changes as well. Definitely nothing left on the table here. They've done everything they needed to do for this wet weather. If anyone's sitting here saying they're not satisfied, I don't know how they could quite say that. But we get around the outside of their Mercedes AMG GT at turn 4, and we're going to be eyes forward, or through the tunnel actually. No water on the circuit through the tunnel here, so a little reprieve from the overwhelming sound of the rain. But now we're just going to be eyes forward, up ahead now. And this is where the rain's actually going to stop. So we're on lap 17. The rain's going to stop here. So have a look at the weather radar there. You can see the system moving off, and it's just about going to sort of head away. Oh dear, we've actually understeered into the barrier there. So I think we hit a puddle, and that sent us into the barrier. So we have to be really careful with that. But the rain's about to stop here, so the middle of that little crosshair is going to be us, and it's going to just move past the centre of the cross circle there, and the sound has stopped. There's no more rain falling, so now we're just going to be looking for the surface and as it dries. So this is why I wanted to have the fine weather at the start and the fine weather at the end, because it'll give a chance to have a look at how the wet weather develops and how it dissipates. But there's not really too much. There wasn't really too much going on up until here, where we finally caught up to the leader, Matt Galloway here. So we just send it down the inside here, clean past him on the exit of turn 1. We get a much better run through turn 1 on that occasion there, and we send it up the inside of turn 2. And now the crucial thing that you can see now that the rain has stopped is the beginning of the formation of the dry line on the circuit again. Something completely brand new, something we didn't have in Gran Turismo Sport. And you can see on the water surface indicator there that the level that it's showing is sort of down halfway now. Remember, it was right up to the top of that second bar there, so it's dropped a bit, and we're not in the tunnel. You can see here it drops completely to nothing, because obviously there's no rain happening in the tunnel. As we exit the tunnel, it goes back up to halfway, and then we get spun out by the Lamborghini on the exit of the tunnel. Oh my goodness, I was like, oh, did I lose it on the curb? And then the Lambo went past, and we've been completely rotated around there, so obviously he couldn't handle with being overtaken. I sort of was wondering if I turned down on him a little bit, but the amount of overlap that was there was truly, truly minimal. But now we've got to catch up to him. But now we've got to think about whether we're actually going to pit in onto the dry set. I think at this particular stage, the fastest tyre right now in theory would probably be the intermediates, because that water level indicator's in that second third of the water meter. So I think the intermediates are going to be good now, but you know, I'm obviously not going to pit onto the intermediates for 2 laps and then go back onto the slicks and make 2 extra stops. I think at this stage I was sort of tossing up, do I pit in for the slicks? Because that's what the track is beginning to do. It's beginning to lighten up as well. The clouds are dissipating. The sky is starting to become blue again. But yeah, I'm basically just looking, tossing up whether the pit loss to pit in for the slicks is going to honestly be worth it, because the other thing we have to think about as well is if I'm on the slick tyres and go slightly offline, there's going to be no grip for me, so it's going to be so easy to make a mistake. And have a look at this. I'm going to go wide at this final turn here, and you can see the wet line as I go onto the outside there. It goes back up to almost completely waterlogged, and as I go back to the dry line, it drops down almost an entire third. So yeah, really significant dry line here. And imagine if I just went slightly off that on the dry tyre. So not only was there the level of risk associated with pitting in for the next set of slick tyres, it's also the time lost. So I could lose 20 seconds in the pit stop and then also lose 20 seconds from a crash. And the question mark is whether I could avoid a crash and gain 20 seconds on the slick set of tyres. So as long as there's sort of water spraying up from the back of the car ahead of me or the back of my car, I'm pretty much going to stay on the wet tyres. It also gives me a good safety net in case I go slightly offline. I'm on the correct tyre to actually deal with that slight excursion off the dry line. But you can immediately see just how deeper of a level and how much more stuff this dynamic time of day and dynamic weather conditions actually adds to the game. Imagine this in a championship race or in a league race, where maybe you're racing for 2 hours or something and you've got a period of 30 minutes of rain, and then you get to see the absolute complete drying of the circuit as well as the phase onto the dry tyre. Because with only 5 laps to go here, I'm going to be pretty surprised if this track actually dries out enough for a pit in onto the slick tyres to actually be worth it. But I guess we can look at the time difference as well. Currently, or we're about to cross the line here. We'll see what this lap time is. Obviously, I crashed on lap 18, which is why that lap's particularly bad. But we're in the 116s now. 116 on lap 19 and a 116 on lap 20. And the current fastest lap of the race is a 108.9. So we're running about 8 seconds slower than we were on the slick tyres, on these wet tyres on this drying circuit. So, you know, that would probably take me 3-4 laps to try and gain back all of my pit loss. Is it going to be worth it? There's only 4 laps left in the race, including on the next one I'll probably have 4 to go. So it's going to be pretty touch and go as to whether I'm actually going to make this pit stop, because at the moment it's really not looking like I am. But at this stage, especially given that we're only 2/10 behind the lead of the race, 6.7 seconds away from the guy in third, which happens to be the guy that actually has the fastest lap, yeah, the pit stop is not looking to be worth it. But I think what's important to note as well is that the AI car has the fastest lap, not me. The AI are not as bad as they are in GT Sport. I would argue they're actually quite good in terms of pace here, because I was sort of trying my best, trying to feel my way through the grip, find where the grip is, pretty much just doing my absolute best to keep the car under control while also not crashing. And I was doing 108s at the start, but I wasn't able to do a 108.1. I'm sure I probably could if I had more practice, because obviously I pretty much had never driven the circuit before this race. But it just goes to show the AI car, the AI are not crap. And what's further confirming that is that I'm actually struggling to catch this Lamborghini. I think the Lambo is going to have a slight advantage in a straight line, which is not helping my case, but I'm catching a little bit in the corners, but it's not like they're braking 100 metres too early like they did in GT Sport and took an apex speed half of what you could. But now we've got a Jaguar F-Type doing their best Nikita Mazepin impression, getting in the way, a lapped car getting in the way, the blue flags are out, and the Jaguar is not having any of it. I think what makes this particularly difficult is that we all want to stay on this narrow, dry line. As soon as you go onto the wet stuff, there's going to be hardly any grip out there. And again, I probably don't know if that Jaguar has pitted back off the wet tyres. I would say he probably would have went in for the wets, but maybe he's a lap down because he's done another pit stop back onto the dry tyres now, which would make him going offline particularly perilous. But eventually we get past him, and with sort of 3 laps to go now and 6 tenths to gain on this Lamborghini, it's still going to be looking like to be a good race towards the end. Here we're still just within the slipstream, I assume. I'm going to assume the slipstream is 7.5 tenths, but look at this dry line now. Very, very clear dry line as the track's really shiny towards the outer edges and a lot drier towards the centre. One thing I will say is that the dry line that forms is... Oh, I've spun out! I've actually spun out. I've begun to push too hard, and I've just overstepped the mark there at a crucial time in the race when I've only got basically 3 laps to go to overtake the leader, and on such a short lap, which with such little time left, a spin at that particular stage was really not necessary. So that's going to be really difficult now with 15 seconds if we can actually catch back up to the leader. I think the best we can do now is second, who was quite a bit of time away from me, so it gave me a lot of breathing room to sort of not lose too much time to him, to the mistake. So as we head through up through the tunnel up towards turn 5, we're going to be in the slipstream of this Ford GT, which I think is the same one we were battling earlier in the race. Look at the water splashing up as that car touched the curbs there, so a really nice touch there. The curbs stay wetter for longer, more oversteer through the final turn, but we managed to actually correct that one, heading out of the final turn now with 10 seconds to go. I'm going to move over onto this wet stuff. I'm just experimenting a little bit, seeing if keeping these wet tyres moister can help with the moister than an oyster can help with the level of tyre wear, maybe. But we're going to fast forward all the way through this lap because we had about a 9 or 8 second gap back to the leader, and by the end of the penultimate lap here, we're 4 tenths behind. So I think at this stage what we're seeing now is the AI struggling with the wet tyre on the dry track. You can see there's no spray coming up from the cars that are directly on the middle of this dry line here, although there's a little bit of spray coming off the back of the Ford GT. But right now, no spray, and then there is. So parts of this dry line are completely free of water, and I think at this stage is right about when I'd probably think about pitting in for dry tyres. But given that it's the last lap of the race, it's just going to be a race for the lead because we've caught way back up to him now, 1.8 seconds up to the back of the Lamborghini, and this is the Lamborghini that also spun me out on the exit of turn 5, on the exit of the tunnel on lap 18, was it? So we're going to definitely be looking to give him just desserts. No, I'm joking. I'm not actually going to punt him off, but I'd like to beat him. He's got a 4-second penalty there. I've managed to get rid of my penalty, thank goodness. I think it's just a matter of bleeding the penalty off in these custom races here. But as we head up through the final turn with 1 second of gap, we absolutely send it in, risk getting onto that wet line there. Tiny bit of oversteer, but we managed to get around the outside of the Lamborghini Huracan. He's still got a 4-second penalty. I've got no penalty, so even if he overtook me here, there would still be no way he could win. But we've come home in P1 on our first race in dynamic weather against the AI, which, quite surprisingly, are not crap. That was actually a really good race, really good pursuit for that driver there in the Lamborghini all the way to the end. But yeah, oh my goodness, how good's that dynamic weather? That was incredible. So I think my first impressions of the wet weather is really, really good. But what I would like to go further and do is test out what the dry tyres felt like pretty much at the level of moisture we saw on that final lap. So there was some of the AI cars not quite kicking up any spray on some parts of that dry line, which, as I said before, tells me there's no water left on the surface. So I think by the end of the race, the slick tyres were probably the fastest, but I think I needed maybe 5, 6, 7 more laps to actually make that switch over to the slick tyres actually worth it, and that's sort of pending any mistakes which I may have made on the slick tyre. So there's more testing to be done. I still want to see if the dry line actually forms based on where the cars in the race actually drive, or whether it just forms in the same spot every time. I'm leaning towards the latter, but it's still probably worth a test there. But overall, wet weather, big thumbs up for me. That's fantastic, that little extra bit that you have to think about. It's not even a little extra, it's a really big aspect that we now have to think about during our racing. But anyway, that's going to finish up my first Gran Turismo 7 video, so do hit the like button if you enjoyed, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos and streams from me, including lots from GT7. Do leave a comment as well as questions, comments, and constructive criticism, as always, very much appreciated. But that's going to be the end of this one today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.